been more than just myself and a few others who have predicted a defection from the Ohio State wide receiver room with the stack of talent and depth there for the Buckeyes at receiver. And a shoe has fallen here in the last 24 hours. We got Pat Murphy on the line from Bucknuts 247 Sports to break down Ohio State football, the NFL draft, of course, coming up as well. Pat, how are we doing today?
Good. It's an off season, but things just keep happening, right? So staying busy.
Yeah, so Jameson Williams announced that he is entering the transfer portal. And you're talking about one of the top wide receivers in the country coming out of high school. Certainly had a limited amount of playing time, but played well when given the opportunity and really highlighted his career at Ohio State, as it turns out, with a nice performance against Clemson with a touchdown catch and 3 catches for 62 yards in that game that the Buckeyes, of course, moved on to the national championship game. So no surprises, as we've discussed again with you and others concerning the wide receiver position and there being transfers. Any surprise that it was Jameson Williams?
No, not really. I think when Chris Olave announced he was coming back for his senior season, I think a lot of people assumed that there would be an odd man out in that room. Jameson Williams was a guy who was kind of the third starter a year ago for the Buckeyes. Had an opportunity, though not a huge opportunity, to kind of make his presence felt last year, and finished the season. You mentioned the Clemson game, which was his biggest performance, 3 catches and the big touchdown that kind of ended the game, but only 9 catches on the year, 154 yards and 2 touchdowns. Wasn't on the field, I think, as much as he expected. It was a lot of 2 tight end sets, and then obviously Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. So this spring, I think, was a chance for him to try and figure out what his role was going to be. And what he probably found out, and this is inference on my part, is that because of the talent in Ohio State's receiver room, because of the way they've recruited these last 2 years, he was probably going to be further down the depth chart than he liked. And I imagine there were some honest conversations between him and Brian Hartline and maybe Ryan Day about that. So I think that it came down to, do I want to stay here and, potentially be the 4th or 5th wide receiver? And obviously, he would be given a fair shot to fight for that number 3 spot, but, the talent is just so great. Or, jump in the transfer portal. The NCAA obviously recently announced a new one-time transfer with immediate eligibility. Jump in that transfer portal and, see what options he's got and find somewhere where he can go and play right away and really be a factor, which I think he can be. I think he's a very talented receiver, and I think in most wide receiver rooms in the country and in wide receiver rooms that Ohio State has had in the past, he would be a top 2 wide receiver. It just happens that the Buckeyes have a ton of talent, and Chris Olave decided to come back for a senior year. So Jameson Williams, like I said, great talent, good kid. It wouldn't surprise me if he ends up someplace like a Missouri. He's from St. Louis, so I could see that being a fit. Mookie Cooper, who was a freshman wide receiver at Ohio State, transferred already to Missouri, so that could be nice. But from what I've heard, there are already quite a few suitors across the country that are interested in him. So he will have a chance to kind of pick where he wants to go and find the best situation for him.
Oh, I bet there are suitors out there. Actually, it was just today I saw a number on 247 Sports concerning how many players had opted for the transfer portal, and a component that was first introduced sometime in mid-2018, and the number was outrageous. I don't even remember what the number is, but obviously the great majority of those players are role players who have been pushed way down the depth chart at various schools all over the place, from group of 5 all the way to the top of college football. And so we're generally looking at role players who are just looking for a better fit or a chance to start maybe at a lower level. Jameson Williams, though, would happen to be at or near the top end of the transfer portal in regards to a guy that would have tons of options out there just based on his ability, the scouting report on him coming out of high school and what he was able to show in his brief stints with the Buckeyes. So he's a pretty valuable commodity. And yeah, he's going to land on his feet and be able to, I would think, go to a pretty prominent program and still be a major factor for a team that needs a wide receiver. No question about that. We got Pat Murphy on the line from 247 Sports. Bucknuts, join him right there. Interesting article that he posted just recently concerning Ohio State assistant coach's salary. So head on over there, check that out. In particular, I found it interesting, just the value that Al Washington in particular puts in his job at Ohio State versus what he could have done there at Tennessee. So check out Pat's article there. Of course, the spring games in the books. The quarterbacks were on display first and foremost. 3 of them in particular. I think it's a general thought that 2 separated from the other one. Not that anyone performed particularly awful. So your thoughts about McCord, Stroud, and Miller?
I agree with you. I think C.J. Stroud and Kyle McCord on the day looked the part, so to speak, especially C.J. Stroud, who I know a lot of people view as the guy, even though Ryan Day has said that there is no front runner right now. He even followed that up after the spring game. But yeah, CJ Stroud, I mean, he came out confident, throwing the ball around the field, making a number of different type of throws. One that included a touchdown pass to Chris Olave that was a perfect recreation of the one that Justin Fields threw to him right after taking that shot in the side in the college football playoff against Clemson, kind of a rollout, throw it into the corner of the end zone or up against the sideline. So, good to see him kind of recreate that with Chris Olave. You like that if you're a Buckeye fan. But Kyle McCord, first throw, he completes a 55-yard pass showing, no hesitancy from him to go downfield, connects with Garrett Wilson. He also looked very good for a kid who could still be, getting ready for high school prom, for graduation, enrolled early, obviously a 5-star kid. So you expect talent, but you don't always see it right away. And I thought Jack Miller had his moments. His numbers aren't as great as the other 2. He did throw an interception, but he was the first quarterback to come out with just the way the teams worked and drove his team. I can't remember if that was Team Brutus or Team Buckeye, down the field. And looked good doing it. It was that interception that seemed to rattle him a little bit at the end of that drive. And then he didn't throw a completion for 3 more passes and missed on a couple. So it was just, I think it was, confidence. And then you make a bad play and it's responding to that. And it just took him a while to get back going. The one thing with Jack Miller in comparison to the other 2 is almost all of his completions, I think, were 11 yards or shorter from the line of scrimmage to where it was caught, which is interesting. I don't know if that is necessarily a design or just how it worked out. In high school, Jack Miller threw the ball downfield, so I don't think there's any question about his arm strength or ability to complete passes downfield. But interesting to note that, whereas the other 2 each took shots, completed passes downfield, and had those opportunities. Hard to tell going back and watching on TV if there were some deep routes that maybe Jack Miller just missed. But I think all in all, what you saw was that all 3 of these quarterbacks are capable of doing the job for Ohio State. They're going to be young. There's going to be mistakes, but they all look like Ohio State quarterbacks. I don't think any of the 3, even, Jack Miller, who, like I said, had probably the worst day, so to speak. I don't think he put any doubt in my mind, at least, that he could do it if needed. And I think a lot of people assume that it'll be CJ Stroud. I am under the same assumption. Ryan Day didn't want to, name a starter. I don't expect him to name a starter until they get into fall camp. But, I think if you're a Buckeye fan, you come out of that feeling pretty good that these 3 guys can do a job for you if you need them to, in the Big Ten.
Maybe I'm swayed by going into it thinking McCord's got a stronger arm, and I'm making a very slight call on this one. It's not like he's got a decidedly stronger arm than Stroud, but I think maybe there were some plays in there that maybe showed that he has the potential to have a really high ceiling arm talent versus Stroud just seeming to be very comfortable with the offense and having the best grasp of the offense. And again, not to separate it to say that that McCord did not have a grasp of the offense, but that Stroud just seems like he's fully ingrained and understands and has full grasp on the offense.
Yeah, and I think that comes with, just being in the program for a year with CJ Stroud and Jack Miller. Kyle McCord's been here since January. So, the fact that he had as good of a grasp on the playbook probably says something about his ability to pick up on that and whatnot. But I agree with you. I was very impressed with what Kyle McCord did. And maybe I shouldn't have been, again, 5-star recruit from Philadelphia, led his school to a high school state championship this past year. So, certainly a talent. It's just, you kind of have an expectation for freshmen, even though all of these guys are rather inexperienced. And I think he looked, at least on that day, and I think it's important to remember, that's one of 15 practices they had this spring. He definitely looked more than capable to run the offense.
Yeah, we all treat it kind of like the audition, and that's not the case. That's just the one that gets televised. So we got Pat Murphy on the line from Bucknuts 247 Sports. The wide receivers all looked great. We expected that. It might be the best group in the country. But Marvin Harrison was the guy that, not just from the standpoint of just showing off talent, but he already, as a freshman, to me, looks like he's got the body frame of a fully developed guy that's been in a weight and conditioning program that looks the part, that could physically be imposing to cornerbacks already.
Yeah, I think the story on offense, other than the quarterbacks, which was the obvious one, were the two young wide receivers, the two freshman wide receivers, and Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka. And you're right about Marvin Harrison. Honestly, that sounds familiar because his dad is a Pro Football Hall of Famer, long time with the Indianapolis Colts. And so, you expect a certain level to come from that. But he's bigger than his dad, taller, thicker than his dad already at this point. So, that's in itself impressive. And then you watch his route running, his hands. It's clear that he's worked with, I assume his father, but also other receiver coaches and is advanced beyond what you expect out of a normal freshman wide receiver. Emeka Egbuka is more of a natural, physical talent. I think he's going to be a special player. He may take a bit more time to be as polished, but he was really impressive, I thought. He made a couple catches that weren't right on the money. One in particular over the middle that he had to reach behind him to grab. I forget which quarterback threw that, but both were very impressive. Finished with 7 receptions apiece. Egbuka had 123 yards. Harrison had 49 and a touchdown. So, you like to see that. How this works out, we talked about previously the depth of this wide receiver, how these guys find a way into that depth chart when you're still trying to figure that out with what is the sophomore class, will be very interesting. But based on the spring game, again, one day out of 15 practices, they really looked like they deserve to be in the rotation at the very least, these freshmen come 2021.
In the play that you're outlining from Egbuka, I think that was the catch of the day. I thought that was the most impressive catch because he not only had to turn around and catch it, which is a difficult thing to do, but he basically stopped on a dime, twisted his body, and he was stretched out as far as he possibly could be to snag that thing out of the air. Mighty impressive out of the wide receiver core, as we expect. And again, it's arguably the best unit in the country, both from quality and depth standpoints. Got Pat Murphy on the line from Bucknuts 247 Sports. And again, really good article. Just if you want the nuts and bolts of the assistant coaches' salaries at Ohio State that were just released, Pat outlines it right there for you on Bucknuts. All right, at the secondary. So I guess the quandary is always one unit looks good, the other one's going to look bad. But at the same time, your thoughts about the way the secondary matched up against an elite wide receiver core?
Yeah, I thought there were some good moments, and that's what I wanted to see, especially given the number of guys that weren't out there. Seven Banks, Cameron Brown, who obviously was hurt during last season, Legend Cavazos, I think redshirt sophomore is what they're labeling him as, who, from everything I heard, had a really good spring, was held out with a minor injury. Ryan Watts looked good, had an interception on that Jack Miller play where he was covering Garrett Wilson and really stuck with him. Cameron Martinez had a few nice plays. Lathan Ransom, the safety who kind of came on at the end of last year, had a nice pass breakup, was kind of all over the field. So, you got to see just a little bit of some of these guys. Obviously, as you said, the wide receivers won the day. But when you're going up against that wide receiver core, especially with a young group in the secondary like that, it's going to be tough. But I think what you saw is there's some depth for this team in the secondary, especially once these guys get back healthy that I mentioned earlier. That's something that Ohio State didn't have last year. It'll not only make them, better because they'll have guys with a little bit more experience, but also more competition in practice, which is only going to be a good thing. And obviously they'll be going up against these wide receivers every day. Iron sharpens iron is the mantra. And, that's only going to make these guys better too. So, pleasantly surprised in the little bits of good play from some of these young secondary players.
Yeah, it's a great point about them matching up with those guys every day and having to keep up with an elite wide receiver core, just making them better. And they've got a premier legacy to live up to as well through the NFL draft. And we'll get our next batch of Buckeyes after 10 were selected in the 2020 draft. And of course, defensive back has been a 3 first rounders, I believe, in 2017, and another with Okuda and Arnett last season, of course, primarily right there in the first 20 picks. So as it stacks up right now, most of the conversation involving Justin Fields, who I find it very intriguing to a certain extent, but a bit alarming that he comes into the 2020 season pretty much in a sense neck and neck with Trevor Lawrence. Maybe Lawrence was considered by maybe 3/4 of the analysts to be the number 1 pick, but it was going to basically default that whoever was not the 1 was going to be the 2. And then suddenly we are here after Justin Fields puts in a pretty stellar season outside of a couple of performances. And to me, really one performance and a stellar performance in the playoffs, that he's being picked apart to the extent of maybe being the 5th quarterback as projected by some people.
I am as confused as anyone on some of these projections. I will be very interested to see how this plays out in the first round of the draft. To me, and I watched Justin Fields very closely. I watched a lot of Trevor Lawrence. I didn't watch as much of some of these other guys, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, a decent amount of Mac Jones before the national championship game. To me, Justin Fields is the 2nd best quarterback in this draft. Obviously there's preferences involved in terms of offense and scheme, but I just don't see some of the knocks on him. If you go back, he goes through his progressions. He reads defenses. He doesn't always have to, because Chris Olave gets open a lot. Garrett Wilson gets open a lot. So you go to the open wide receiver in my mind. But yeah, it's very confusing. The questioning of his work ethic and how much he loves football. This is a guy who fought to play last season, despite the fact that he was already ranked as one of the top quarterbacks in the draft, didn't need a season to play. So yeah, confusing to me. I think regardless, wherever Justin lands, he's going to work hard. He's going to be productive in the NFL. I just hope it's a good situation for him. Even if that means dropping a little bit, I think, you're better off in a good situation than maybe going at the top of the draft and ending up someplace where it just doesn't work out for various reasons. So, we'll find out at the first round, but it would surprise me if he drops like some people are saying.
I understand that scouts are paid to pick out every little nuance and to nitpick to the nth degree. That's why they're there. But at the same time, man, these guys aren't robots, and you're not going to find a quarterback that's going to have perfect technical skills and fundamentals. We see guys that succeed in the NFL all the time, and Phillip Rivers would be the first one that comes to mind, that basically throws the football like a shot put, and it didn't hurt him in throwing for like 50,000 yards in the NFL. So Justin Fields, to me, and again, he brings the athleticism that the other guys don't to the table. I thought he had a stellar season. I thought the Northwestern game was a little bit rough. The Indiana game, I thought that was overblown. I thought he had like 3 bad plays, but he played really well the rest of the game. And then I think he showed us a lot against Clemson. When the target is there for an entire season, some guys would get a bit freaked out by the pressure of having to deliver on what you've been aiming at the entire season, but he was able to pull through on a big stage. And I thought the national championship game was pretty much of a neutral performance. I didn't think it should have added or detracted from his status because he was a bit overmatched. He lost his best running back, his best guard, and he was just in a difficult spot playing from behind the whole game.
Yeah, so, I completely agree. And what we didn't mention is the injury against Clemson. You know, again, a guy who you know, people are saying may not love football enough, decided to come back in that game and play through that, you know, pain in his side. You know, leading in, or, you know, that late in the, I think it was late in the first half. And I mentioned that throw earlier that he made, had a couple of nice throws, you know. So I just, you know, I look at what he did, and I was as impressed with him as almost anyone in the country. So, you know, I guess we'll see.
Pat Murphy on the line talking Buckeyes football, the NFL draft, of course, Thursday night, heading through the weekend. So not needing to go through every possible scenario with Ohio State football players. There's about a dozen that could be drafted. I think 10's pretty much a rough number. Just some guys that are standing out to you in regards to could be after Fields that factor in pretty prominently.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see where someone like a Wyatt Davis, you know, the All-American guard, goes. He's a guy who originally opted out of last season because he was NFL draft ready, and, you know, elected to return once the Big Ten season was reinstated. You know, where he goes, a lot of people are projecting him later second round, early third round. I'm surprised he's not earlier, but I guess offensive guards really have to stand out to be first round picks. Baron Browning is another one who's really interesting to me. The linebacker who can do a lot of different things, very athletic, can play on the edge almost as a defensive lineman, you know, can blitz from the linebacker position. You know, I think if you get him into the right scheme, he could be very successful with kind of a weapon defensively. And he kind of got better as his Ohio State career progressed. So those are guys that I'm interested in. And I think the other one that's really intriguing is Shaun Wade, cornerback, who was a borderline first round conversation a year ago, came back for his redshirt junior year, expecting to kind of take on that Jeff Okudah role and vault himself into a top 5 pick. Didn't have a good season, played hurt. And, you know, so the film is not good, but the athleticism, the abilities he showed as a slot corner the year before, you know, there's a lot there to work with. You know, what NFL team is willing to take a risk on him after a poor year, and, you know, how high does he go? So those are probably the 3 biggest ones that I'm interested in. You know, we're probably talking day 2 for some of those guys, second, third rounds. You know, with Wade, I think we'll wait and see. But so those are the guys probably after Fields that I'm most interested in terms of where they go and you know, kind of the fit for the team they end up with.
There was a name brought up during our Ohio State live show that I was shocked to hear getting moved up draft boards, and that's Pete Werner. I did not expect him to play prominently, and I heard some pretty high draft grades on him.
Yeah, he's one. I've seen the same thing. I think the versatility of Pete Werner, you know, he played both outside linebacker positions for Ohio State, one of which is kind of a hybrid position where he had to do a lot of covering. You know, I think he showed a lot. I think he had a good pro day as well, which certainly helped him. You know, he's moving up. I would be surprised if he's not maybe late third round from what I've seen. But, you know, I think he's an interesting guy in terms of once he gets to a team and they figure out a role for him, I think he could be a guy that has a really good career regardless of when he gets drafted. You know, he can just do a lot of different things at linebacker, and, you know, that makes it easy for teams, especially with, you know, travel rosters and things like that. You got to have guys that can be versatile, and he certainly is.
I've been listening to too much scorn and criticism from Buckeyes fans for too long on P. Werner. He could be a top 100 player taken in the NFL draft.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Pat Murphy on the line from Bucknuts 247 Sports. Again, join his work on over there at Bucknuts. Pat, we appreciate you stopping by.
Awesome. Thank you.